Okay, today, folks, we're going to start the rebuilding process of a Marx 666 motor. Everything here has been disassembled and cleaned. That's the first part of the process. Here's the component parts. Here's the field coil assembly, the rear drivers, the pickup assembly, the E-reversing unit, the brush plate, reduction gears, bearings, brushes, and armature. Now, the first thing we do after we clean everything is check all the tolerances and also inspect certain parts to make sure they're working properly. The first thing to do is I work on the E-reversing unit. That's basically the brains of the whole motor. This makes it go either forward and reverse. Now, I've already taken this thing apart and cleaned it. A lot of people don't like to touch these things. They are a little delicate. But how they work is there's a coil back here, a magnetic coil, which forces this piston up and down, which in turn moves this rocker switch back and forth to make the engine go forward and backward. Okay, so what I normally do after servicing is I test it. And in order to do that, I'll hook it up to some power. One to the pickup assembly, and the other to the negative, and you see how it works. As you can see, rocker switch is going back and forth very nicely. It's not sticking, so everything's good. Okay. That's fine. Now we have to look at the smoke unit. And that's tested the same way. You can see here's the unit itself. There's the flapper here at the back and the rocker piece that makes the flap go back and forth, which causes the smoke to puff. So we'll hook up some juice to that. And see what we've got here. Oh, here it goes. Oh yeah, that works really good. Okay, we don't have to worry about that. If it didn't work, I'd have to separate this casing and then put in a new smoke element. That's kind of tough to do. All right. Now, since everything's been checked over, we have to check for tolerances. The brush plate has this little bushing in there. That's for the armature. The armature fits in there, like so. If this is worn too much, which rarely happens, the motor becomes noisy, runs erratically, and eventually shorts itself out. The armature shaft is 122 thousandths of an inch. So these normally are 125 thousandths with 3 thousandths play. So we'll see what this one measures out. I've got a pair of verniers here. Okay, that's 126 thousandths. That's great. Okay, normally if it gets up to 130 or 132, that's a little sloppy, in which case I have to replace the bushing. These bushings are unavailable anywhere in the aftermarket, so I have to make my own. The other thing we check are the axle bearings. Here's one right here. And here's an axle. All the axles for post-war are the 140 thousandths. And so is this one, as they all are. Usually pre-wars are 135. They take different bushings. So we'll see what this one weighs out to be. Okay, that's 145. That's perfect. Again, we got 5 thousandths play. Normally when they get up to 150, that's too much. I throw them out and put in a new one. So now we're ready for start to assemble it. So we start here with the field coil. We have to solder the E unit back into the field coil. So that's the first part of the assembly. One side goes in the front and one side goes in the back. Oh. There we go. There's one side. Over. And the other side. There we go. All right. Well, that didn't stick too well, did it? Okay. Not much here to work with. We'll try this again. I'll pull it out a little bit. That looks a little bit better. Oh yeah, that's good and tight. All right. Now this is the first part of the assembly. Everything has to fit together before we put the top plate on. So we make sure the E unit goes in these two slots. Turn it over. Make sure the pickup assembly is in its two slots. Normally it doesn't like to stay there. This is no exception. Okay, now we put the top plate on and line up the slots again for the pickup assembly. Which is easier said than done. There we go. Okay. Now, oh, not quite. There we go. Now we put in two nuts to hold the assembly in place. I have to tell you that this is one of the tightest motors that I've worked on in quite a while. Those bearings are really tight, almost like new, and you can tell by looking here at the pickup plate itself that there's hardly any wear, which is a good sign. So whoever gets this motor is going to be very happy with it. Okay, that's step number one. Now here comes the armature. Okay, I've inspected the gear. As you can see, there's hardly any wear on the gear. So we add a little oil to the front bushing. This bushing is plastic. Some of the other motors have a bronze bushing with a slot. Work it in a little bit. Now, this bushing itself has a little flat on it. This flat has to line up with the flat in the housing. And once that's done, oh, that fit right in there, nice. Then we can put in the brush plate, like so. 2 nuts hold that on. Okay. And the screw goes in the bottom. That is the negative contact for the lower brush. If you forget to put that in, it won't run. Okay, we'll tighten these nuts up. Okay, you can see it spins freely. We'll put a drop of oil there on the bushing and shaft. Let it work in a little bit. You'll be surprised what just 1 drop of oil will do. Now we install the brushes. These brushes look like they've hardly been worn also. Normally when they get down to about 3/16 of an inch, they're pretty well shot. So these are well over 1/4 of an inch long, so there's quite a bit of life left in them. To install the brushes, here's the brush spring that holds the brush into place. We just pull that up, push it over to the side. The brush itself, here's a contact with the armature. This is the outside of the bushing, and it has a slot in it. That slot's there for a reason. Okay, we install the brush, put the spring back in place. Now, that spring has to fall into that slot. And that slot is there so the brush won't rotate around when the engine's running, when the motor's running. If so, it won't run properly. It'll run sporadically. So we'll put in the other one for the negative side. Same way, slot up. Into the housing, snaps back. The spring is in place with the slot. Okay. Now what we do is we check for play. Now you can see the brushes are moving up and down with the armature. Okay, it should do that so there's no binding up with the brushes. So at this point, we can actually test the motor, see how it runs. Well, let's do that. We'll set it up again. We'll put one side on the pickup, the other side on the ground, and fire it up. There we go. Sounds good. Oh, I had a little bit of a binding in there. And a drop of oil here, and a drop of oil on the other side. Normally, after it runs for a few minutes, whoops, okay, the contact came off. Normally, after it runs for a few minutes, you'll hear it quiet down once the oil gets to work in. And normally the revs start to come up a little bit too. Now, I'm going to have to hold it upright to check and see if the reversing unit works fine, because it only works in an upright position. Yes, it did. It worked great. Okay, well now what comes is the installation of the reduction gears, wheels, and finally the smoke unit. But this is the meat and potatoes of the whole thing. Once you get this thing running like this, you're good to go. The only thing you have to worry about is any run out from the drivers and the wheels. And that can be straightened out with a good pair of channel locks. So that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed it. And come and visit me on eBay. My handle is Marxmotorman. Thank you.